Chad, were you rooting for it? All right.
All right.
Welcome, everybody, to our January 3rd, 2022 special school board meeting. Drew, can you hear us okay? Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So with that, since it's kind of unique in that we're having a special meeting before our organizational meeting, and since our previous clerk has submitted her resignation as of January 1st, I'm going to ask Mr. Bellingham, our vice chair, to act as the acting clerk for our first meeting before we get to the organizational meeting later tonight. And Ms. Zavro will keep the minutes. So with that, Mr. Bellingham, will you please determine if we have a quorum?
Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum of membership present.
Wonderful, thank you. And with that, we'll all stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Bellingham, for leading that.
You're welcome.
Drew, just making sure we are on Google or YouTube. Okay, wonderful, thank you. With that, I will entertain a motion to approve the brief agenda for this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Robichaud, a second by Ms. Steves. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Hi, Mr. Olson.
Stepping over a cord.
Yep, you're good, you're good. We'll give you a minute or so to get settled there. This brings us to item number 5, the superintendent interview workshop and slate presentation. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
It's good to be here. Thanks for arranging a little warm up in the temperature. That's much appreciated as well. And you know, when we first started this journey, it was quite warm. It was almost 5 months ago. And so here we are now in January. And as I said in our planning meeting, there would be a lull in your lives as board members, at least as in terms of superintendent search activity, and then you're going to become very busy. We're on the eve of your becoming very, very busy. So we're here today to finalize all of the planning for the first round interviews, talk about those second round interviews. We're going to finalize the questions you're going to ask in that first round interview, and review the candidates that we've presented to you. I've had a meltdown on my computer, but you have access to each of the slated 6 candidates' applications. When you open those, you will find that each of the 6 follow the same format. You're going to find their personal data, their current position information, experience and accomplishments in the positions that they've held, their formal educational training, their honors and awards, their professional memberships, their community and civic participation, publications, presentations, workshops, their current certifications, the responses to 2 open-ended questions, reference letters, and then their current contact information and other legal information and confirmation that they have provided. So, for each of the 6 candidates, let's go ahead, Kathy, if you would, and distribute those.
Ted, just to verify, all of this stuff that's being passed out now is essentially now public information.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. They would, somebody could come and request it.
Yes.
Thank you. And this packet is exactly what was in the Google Files?
Say again, Courtney.
This matches what was in the Google Files exactly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for printing it out, Kathy.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. Ken, is there anything you would like to have shared on the screen?
We will in a moment here
Okay.
with a PowerPoint.
Okay.
For right now, I think we're okay.
Okay, thank you.
So you're going to find the materials for the 6 candidates, and they're presented in alphabetical order. And in the materials, in addition to what I just described that is part of their formal application, I have prepared a candidate overview. So in the candidate overview, you're going to find their academic credentials. So, for example, when they received their bachelor's degree, their major areas of study, if it was provided, and the date, and then so on, their master's degree, and any other certifications or additional degrees granted. And then their employment history. And their employment history, I start with the most recent and then work progressing backwards in time. And then a few comments, about a dozen bullet points of comments. So I'm not going to review each of the candidates' applications. That's for your perusal. Take you some time to go through those. But let me just talk a little bit about each of the 6 candidates that we're presenting to you to be interviewed. First one is Karsten Anderson. Karsten's currently the superintendent in Red Wing, Minnesota. He's been there a little over 10 years. This is his 11th year, if my math is correct. He's been a superintendent in 3 different school districts, spanning the last 23 years. Karsten is the type of fellow that quickly gives credit to others. When I was speaking with him about accomplishments, he would say something along the lines of, "This wasn't all about Karsten. Let me tell you how this came about." So he's quick to give credit to others on his staff. A lot of community partnerships to include nonprofits and for-profit businesses. Successfully passed an operating levy referendum, which, similar to here in Faribault, allowed for expansion of student programs. Interesting thing that they've developed is a decision-making matrix. So every key decision, they look at a series of questions and then seek feedback from appropriate groups within community and schools. And it's based upon a program out of Jefferson Schools in Louisville, Kentucky, that they imported that into there. And they're just now beginning to use that. Another interesting program was the advent of a Adult 101 class for all high school students. And it's aimed at soft skills. How to introduce yourself, the importance of showing up, being on time, importance of letting others know if you're not going to be in attendance, those kinds of things. And that was put together after conversations with local businesses on what are you looking for in your employees. I asked the candidates for unique ideas, silver bullets, if you will, on the current dilemma that's confronting many school districts on recruitment and retention of staff. And Karsten talked about the student teaching partnerships that they have aggressively pursued with Winona State and then 2 of the universities in Wisconsin, primarily aimed at recruiting a more diverse teaching staff. There are other bullets there, but the one that I kind of chuckle about, he told the story of one of the new initiatives where students were able to work with businesses. And they invited this young woman in to present and talk about her experience, and she took off her shoe and put it on the podium. And they were, well, what's this all about? Well, she had taken that shoe design from an idea and developed it into an actual product that Red Wing Shoes manufactured. She was wearing the shoes that she had designed as part of her high school experience. So I thought that was pretty good example of a successful program. The next candidate, someone that you know quite well, perhaps, Jamie Benty, the high school principal here in Faribault. And again, you've got his academic credentials and his employment history. And you know, one of the things is and I've talked with Jamie a number of times before he became a candidate, and finally he said, you know, I took a self-inventory of myself and my current position, and I realized that I was very interested in working with the community and programs and structures in our school district beyond what I can do as a high school principal. And that tipped him into becoming a candidate. He talked about businesses, you know, that are, his words, screaming for employees who have skills such as timeliness, problem solving, responsibility, as opposed to content skills being the actual skills needed to perform within that job. Those can be taught by the local businesses, were his observation. He talked about behavior, and he quoted his dad, and he said, my dad always said, don't pick up the rope when they throw it out in front of you. And but that being, don't be misled. Take your time, stay on your course. Don't just reach for the easiest thing that someone is going to give you. He talked about the program of bringing parents into the school. Many times these parents have not experienced formal schooling. And that was an aha moment to them to see how this structures. And I also laughed when he told me about, at the end of that morning, he would invite the parents to stick around and go to lunch. And the looks in their youngsters' eyes of, whoa, mom or dad is here, and seeing that, wow, they now understand what it is about schooling. He felt that was quite an aha moment for the young people to see their parents actually there in schools. So those are a few comments about Jamie. I'll leave the rest of those for your perusal. The next candidate overview is Brian Boyson. He's currently the superintendent and elementary principal in Kenyon, Wanamingo, which has about 700 students. He's been there for the last couple of years. And prior to that, he was superintendent and elementary principal in Lyle, Minnesota as well. So you can see his employment history. Interesting employment history in that he did an extended student teaching experience in a Department of Defense schools in Germany. So a very unique student teaching experience, and that made a very lasting impact upon him and upon his views of education, I might add, as well. So he's had superintendent experience in 2 different school districts. He's on track to finish his doctorate degree at Winona State this year. And Jerry, you and I both know sometimes being on track, the track can sometimes be misaligned, but he is on track to finish that this year. He's had successful passage of levy referendums in both Lyle and in Kenyon, Wanamingo. And he's had some interesting experiences. While he was in Lyle, he had a semi-truck that literally drove through the building. You remember reading about this on a sub-zero day and how they pieced back together the logistics so the kids could return to school. He talked about building the relationships in his current position that led to the successful passage of the levy referendum. In particular, reaching out to the 5 local newspapers, most of them weeklies, that provide coverage of the school district, and repairing what at the time was an acrimonious relationship between the school district and the newspapers. They have a motto in their schools of "Build a Better Me," which is all about how to make the student better in every way, academically, emotionally, socially. It's something that they've followed as a model in Kenyon, Wanamingo. special education background, by the way. This is primary area of teaching experience, and very comfortable in that area, and has done a great number of things structurally to make certain services are provided when needed in a fair and equitable fashion, and when not needed, to make certain that the student is sent on a different course. Okay. Next candidate is Joe Brown. Joe is currently interim superintendent in Clear Creek, Amana. Clear Creek, Amana is adjacent to Iowa City, Iowa School District. And so if you are familiar with that area and driving down Interstate 80, there's a very large shopping center on the northwest corner of Iowa City. And the Clear Creek, Amana School District and Iowa City School District boundary runs through the middle of that shopping center. And so it's a rapidly growing area. He was superintendent over here in Fairmont for 11 years, and he's had superintendent experience now in 3 different school districts spanning 16 years in total. He started actually in the private sector. He built a very impressive array of vocational programs, Air Fairmont, in partnership with a number of businesses, to include an incredible facility that the taxpayers funded to reflect those programs right there for students. It talks about young people graduating from those vocational programs and stepping right out into industry at very handsome paying jobs from their, after graduating from school in Fairmont. He's very proud of the turnaround in finances, in particular at Fairmont, and I think he even included a few additional items in his application addressing that. So he takes a great deal of pride in that. He instituted a number of innovative staff incentive programs for teachers to become certified in other areas where they had acute need, like English language learners, which is a very unique way to go about growing your own, if you will, particularly in those areas where it's needed. The interesting thing is, he was a principal at one of the first charter schools in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, one of the toughest areas in that city. And 100% of the students in that school were students of color, by the way. Okay, the 5th candidate, Dr. Emery Leland, someone that you're all quite familiar with. You're community education director here. And I was always enjoyed speaking with Ann over these last few months. She's been here over 9 years in Faribault, and she also has teaching experience internationally, just as I mentioned a few minutes ago for one of the other candidates. And I was very proud of the branding initiative and the additional communication efforts undertaken by the district, and she sees that as significant improvement in communication with the community at large here in Faribault. She likes the idea of creating incentives to attract and retain employees with scholarships, scholarships to adults, particularly adults of color, and recognition of simple things like non-traditional holidays to increase retention of employees and the recruitment of future employees. In other words, celebrating different cultures that might allow individuals from that culture to become staff members here in Faribault. Feels that growing your own is the key to employee recruitment. Her superintendent license is in progress and should be finished by June of this year. So even though she has a doctorate degree, she doesn't have all the licensure work completed for a superintendent's license. Shouldn't be an issue. Should be wrapped up by June of this year. And obviously an extensive background working with the state of Minnesota. You also notice a very comprehensive list of references and reference letters in Anne Marie's application. And finally, alphabetically finally, is Ron Wagner, who's currently Associate Superintendent in the Minneapolis schools. And Ron has been in the Minneapolis School District for over 20 years now. And originally from a small community in Indiana, and then moved back to Minnesota. His wife is a Minnesotan and moved back to be nearer her family. And you can see, he started as a math teacher in Minneapolis and has grown through the ranks, teacher on special assignment, principal, assistant associate superintendent. He was interim chief of schools and associate superintendent there for the last 8 years in Minneapolis. As I said, he grew up in a rural community of Indiana and wants to be part of a community as opposed to a larger city such as Minneapolis. He sees Faribault as uniquely fitting his passion for working with a highly diverse student body and a highly diverse community as well. Talks about authentic listening, and he cited several examples where they would go to different communities to listen to what their views were on a particular topic or initiative rather than inviting the community into them. He felt that was much more effective in seeking out voices sometimes that are not heard in a typical board meeting. He's very proud of his work as principal at Ann Sullivan School, which is, I believe, a K-8 school. And he was the 7th principal in 10 years. And it took a lot of work to build a new community, and that's primarily student body, primarily of East African community members. He's worked with the Wallace Foundation on growing their own professionals and special programs for black men in particular to become educators. Self-described as a humble person, and when you speak with him, I think you're gonna sense that as well. So those are a little bit of insights about the 6. It's a common question, so I'll preempt it. Well, how many candidates did we have? And always my response is, we're looking for one. So I believe you had about, I don't remember the exact number, around 15 that actually did the full application process. I did screening interviews personally with 12 individuals, some who completed applications, some who decided to not follow through. We probably had communications with, oh golly, at least 40 individuals to explore their interest in the position. We had a couple that were candidates right up until right before Christmas. And I said, look, the train is leaving the station. Are we in or out? And so it was a very fluid recruitment for 2 months in there. And some days I woke up feeling very, very enthused, and other days I was shaking my head saying, what happened? And but I'm very pleased with the 6 candidates. It's quite a range of backgrounds of experiences, quite a range of academic preparations, and I think you're going to really enjoy sitting down and getting to know 4 people, and 2 people even further in a different role from what you know them today. So we originally talked about slating 5, you wound up with 6, so you're all going to get a little overtime pay, I'm sure of that, just for sitting through those two. Let's talk about the interview questions themselves. Now, you know this, others do not. I sent you a laundry list of questions that reflected in some way the desired characteristics. Remember, that's the collective wisdom of over 500 people in the community that led to the development of the desired characteristics. So that's what we should be looking for. So those questions were submitted to you, and you were gracious enough then to indicate a few questions that you really liked, and that narrowed down the list to just 42. And so if I recall, well, that's not going to work, 60 to 75-minute interview. So then I know that Chad and Jerry worked on trying to narrow it down even further. So what we have in front of you tonight are questions. What we need to decide are two things. One, who's going to ask which question? And then secondly, this is a public meeting. Are we going to make these questions available to the candidates ahead of their interviews slated for later on this week? So let's be thinking about that, and we'll come back to that second question. Let's first of all talk about the questions which you have in front of you. The introduction, normally that's the board chair. And Chad, I would assume you would then just segue right into asking that first question.
Okay.
Okay? And then under the desired characteristic of community builder and trust development, there are a couple of questions listed there. Doesn't make any difference to me. Who would like to ask question number 2? Who's comfortable with that?
I was talking to you.
Richard?
No, I was going to ask you about the questions
Yep.
about, are these questions too long?
I don't think they're too long for the first round
You want to get to
interview.
the point because we want them to be talking to us.
Righto.
So take these questions and kind of boil it down to whatever so that we're not reading a book to the candidates.
We'd have to redraft them, some of the questions.
Yeah.
If you wanted to
It's
do
just
that.
what's the essence of these questions in a few words? Because like I said, I
Yeah.
want to hear from the candidates,
Right.
do
So-
the talking, not us.
Right. Each of the questions ties back in some way to the desired characteristics. So each of these questions is asking the candidate to drill down a little bit on how do you approach, or what in your background addresses one of the desired characteristics. So,
Then you were saying about the
yes.
questions, do we want them to ad lib when they've never seen these? Is that bad policy?
That's not bad, no, that's not bad policy. However, the point to be made that since this is a public meeting, candidates could access these questions today.
Okay, yeah.
And so it's not unheard of to make the questions available to the candidates ahead of time. It's just part of the nuance of Minnesota law where you can't have a confidential search. So it's
But then if they got answers, do we want them reading? It's like an essay at school, and they write something, they are reading it, but they're not talking to us. Does that make sense, Jerry?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I don't think these questions are too long, Mr. Olson. I think that, as they are tied into the profile that we're looking for and the characteristics, that we want to make sure that we are asking a question that will solicit the kind of responses we're looking for. And if we give a one-sentence question, they're going to say, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Explain further, explain further. And I think it really does, as I look at them, Richard, they do elicit some comprehensive responses.
Ted, are these pretty standard questions? All of them that you gave us to choose from, are those often pretty standard amongst you and
yeah,
your peers?
well, standard being, I've seen these questions asked in other interviews, yes. The bank of questions that I drew from for your initial consideration have been developed over years and years. And some that we've developed ourselves, we being folks at HYA, and others that other school boards have asked. And it was like, whoa, that's a great question. Let's include that in our bank here for consider. Courtney?
Ted, I'll ask question number 2.
Pardon me?
I will ask question number 2.
Okay. Got it.
If that's okay with everyone.
Yeah.
Absolutely, sure. Let's go back to, if you will, and I have no problem with the length of the questions. I think each question, Richard, by the time we ask them and the time they give a response, you know, they'll have 4 minutes per question, give or take. Some will be shorter, some they'll elaborate on, you
Yeah.
know. But in terms of your question, your second question, if you will, of providing these questions to the candidates, I love the aspect that they don't come in here fully prepared, that they know what we're going to ask. However, if it's your belief that potentially one of our internal candidates, and maybe that's wrong to assume that, but if we have 2 internal candidates and they would have access to this, I think it's only fair if one does, that all 6 do. I think that's in fairness. Would I love to ask them a question that they don't know is coming? No doubt about it, right? But, you know, if it's Minnesota law that this is all open, it's Minnesota law that it's all open. Jerry, what have you done in the past?
We never had anybody request the questions. We had questions in front of them when they were interviewed, so they could read the questions, but not pass them in advance. But Ted is right, it's an open meeting, and this material has been shared with the board, so if the candidate does ask, they do have a right to it. But I agree with you, Chad, if one asks, then they all get it. I would be very surprised if anybody asks for it.
I mean, not only that, but it's out in our board packet right now.
Yeah.
It's online.
Okay.
Kathy's.
What I asked before I posted that, if it was already proposed out, and I was told yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
no,
so
that's,
it's public already.
yeah,
That's right.
yep.
No, that's
Yep.
correct.
Well, it seems to me that any savvy candidate would be looking at this meeting. And so I'm not really kind of comfortable setting up a little trap where we
Yeah.
don't, you know, the one candidate, I think we should just,
Here's just a comment. Remember, when you invite your 3 finalists back, that second round interview is not script. It's more open. So you'll have a chance there to ask them something that they haven't seen before.
okay.
Mr. Chair, and again, this is a screening of the 6 candidates to the 2 or 3 that we're going to call back. So however they come prepared is part of the screening process. It'll also give us an indication of what kind of homework they've done about the district as well. They
So
will
if
see
they,
the
if they
questions.
see it, they want to research, instead of coming, they should know they can access this material, right? You want them to take.
Right.
Okay. So
Okay.
with that said, will you actually share this, or it's on their own to find it?
I would suggest that we share it,
Yes.
and I'd be glad to send it to the 6,
Okay.
either later this evening or early tomorrow.
And it's their choice if they want to look at it.
Yep.
They can if not.
Yep.
But again, they'll get the questions, but if they're sitting there just reading their answers,
I think if someone came and did that and wasn't engaging with us in a way that we thought was what we wanted from a superintendent, we would end up screening that candidate out if that's how they prepared for the interview. I mean, it's likely someone will come with notes, but I agree with you. If someone can kind of engage with us on the topics, that'll probably be a sign right there that they're not our,
okay.
Righto.
yeah.
Courtney's on question 2. Who wants to do question 3? Does it make any difference?
Mr. Chair, I will take question 3.
Okay.
if That's okay.
And then relationship builder,
I'll take 4.
Richard,
Yeah,
you're all over it. Number 4.
If it's okay with everybody, I'll take 5 unless somebody else has a,
Something about a communicator extraordinary? Extraordinaire, Jerry? Okay.
I was going to fight you for it.
I'm afraid you would probably win.
Cassie, number 6? Okay. That brings us back around to pedagogical expertise. So, let's see, Chad, you were going to do number 1?
Yeah, but I don't need to do 7.
Let's see, what do we have here?
I can start with 7.
Okay, Courtney, thank you.
That's your turn.
That's my turn. That's funny,
Yeah.
my turn.
Management and leadership skills to lead a school district like Faribault. Where are we at?
Chad, that sounds like you.
You want me to take it?
John?
No, I would say, Mr. Chair.
You all right? If I take it down?
Chad is
Okay.
Finance
I'll
Committee.
take that.
Chad, you're doing 8?
I'll do 8, sure.
Yeah, okay. And then leadership style?
I've always been trying to promote student achievement, things like that, so I would take that one if that's okay with everyone.
And then cultural competence?
I'll take that.
Jerry? And then number 11, where are we at? Who's still with just with Cassie? Can you do
Cassie,
11?
Richard,
Or Richard Scott?
he's got 1 so far.
I got one. I'll take 12.
Number 12?
I can take 11.
Cassie's got 11.
Okay.
Richard, 12. Who wants 13?
I would take it as no one.
You'll take 13?
Thanks, Cassie.
Okay.
And then Chad,
Wrap it up?
will you wrap it up there?
So I will do the conclusion, final thoughts, and 14.
Yes. Now, 14 is, some might say it's a little embarrassing, but I think it's important to ask each candidate publicly if there's anything in their background that would be embarrassing to them or to the school district if they were appointed as the next superintendent of schools. Now, don't be alarmed, and I have no reason that any of these 6 will say anything other than no, there isn't. But don't be alarmed if someone does say, well, there was this one situation, and then just listen to it for what it is, and then take that under your consideration. I've had candidates talk about being strapped while consuming, while riding a motorcycle. I've had candidates talk about very ugly public divorces that spilled over into the newspaper. So, those things happen as they go through their lives. But it's important, I think, that we ask that publicly of each of your candidates. Very good.
Ken, how extensive was your background check on these 6?
Yeah, so because I shared with each of the 6 that their names would not be made public until now, that meant that I was not able to call references, for example, to their current board members in some cases, but I did secondary references. Who did I know that I trusted their judgment? So I reached out to those folks. The other thing I would share with you, and I don't believe I'm
I guess I'm
violating-
referring to criminal.
Oh, no, there's nothing. I asked each of them about that. There's nothing there. And in their application, you're going to find at the very end, there's a question that addresses that in the online application.
But do you check that? Do you do?
No. And there's a way to do that, Richard. At the very end, when you wind up with your preferred candidate, way back in the planning meeting, I talked about this. We can do an investigative background check, and that will find everything about them, right down to if they have a propensity to run through stop signs.
Isn't that late in the process? If we find something, then all of a sudden,
Yep.
what do we do?
Well, Richard, I think if I remember correctly, there's a fair amount of cost to that,
There is.
correct? And so
Yeah.
you typically, I believe, do that on your last candidate, just to
Yeah.
make sure that you've dotted your i's and crossed your t's and there's no surprise
Oh,
out there. I believe, but
That's correct. It's either $1,600 or $1,800,
Oh.
something like that. But it's a very extensive.
oh, okay.
For example, they'll go to each university or school attended and validate the degree earned in the major area of study and contrast that to what they filled out on their application. So as in that example, it's not uncommon to find that, I'll pick on myself, that Ted Blazing has a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Northern Iowa with a major in physical education. No, he was wrong. His major was health and physical education and something else. Okay, so that's a small difference, but that's the kind of thing that it would unearth, because there have been situations where candidates have misrepresented themselves and said they had advanced degrees that in fact they did not have. And so it's that kind of thing. It's a very expensive background. And in terms of I know it's additional cost, but just in terms of due diligence, sometimes I think it's well worth it. The other piece to it is a social media investigation, not on things that they're accessing, but on things that they are generating. So if I'm the candidate and I'm generating comments or photos out there on TikTok, it will look to see if there's anything in there that's inappropriate, or Facebook, or Twitter, whatever it might be.
Mr. Bellingham?
Mr. Chair, if I may add, so in my experience, board members, at the Minnesota Department of Education Licensing Department, when any person applies for a license, teaching license, superintendent license, principal license, whatever sort of license, there is a comprehensive background check done as well. So if they hold a current valid Minnesota licensure, teaching, administrative, whatever, that process has been done
Right.
at every time they renew. So that piece has already been taken care of.
So there'd be no criminal activity, for example, that would allow them to be issued a license?
That's correct, or has been addressed at the licensing department with the individual, correct.
Ted, question for you, and Jerry, maybe you can answer this just as well, but all of the candidates, when we ask them questions, are we calling them Mr. and Mrs., Doctor, by their first name? How formal is this?
I always keep it formal until told otherwise, Chad.
Okay.
And
So I'm just looking at Karsten Anderson because he's the first one.
right, good, Mr. Anderson or Karsten. The other option, Chad, is to simply ask them at the start of the interview, how would you like to be addressed? Karsten, Mr. Anderson, Dr. Robichaud, how would you like to be addressed?
Mr. Chair, it just, as I was reviewing these earlier too, there was one candidate whose employment was terminated, and it, several years ago, and apparently it was some kind of a scuffle between international students and local students. I mean, it was very open about it, so obviously, and that would be something that could come up, but I'm assuming that it wasn't of any major sexual issue or anything of that nature, no?
No. After they've been in school administration for a while, the school districts where they've been working, have had lawsuits brought against them for all different kinds of things. And it's not uncommon, particularly for the superintendent, to be named in that lawsuit.
Ted, how do you prevent these candidates, if you check on Facebook, if somebody wants to smear one of these candidates,
Right.
what do you do with that?
That's not much you can do about it, Richard. I mean, folks are going to say what they want out there, and it's unfortunately, it's just part of America today, as you know. Let me just, the schedule you have in front of you there, we start on Friday, January 7. Your first interview is at 10:30. Please, 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 pretty please be here at least at 10:15. to go over your questions, make sure you're all settled in and ready to go. And then the candidates will come in at 10:30, starting at 10:30, and then you're going to have a short lunch break in there, and then you have a 1 o'clock, and a 2:30, and a 4 o'clock. That's Friday. And on Saturday, again, you'll gather at 8:45, at 9 o'clock, and then at 10:30, and then I will be here to meet with you after that to go through a process to narrow the field. So Kathy, will you be greeting the candidates when they arrive? Perfect, thank you.
And Ted, you'll be here at 1 o'clock on Saturday?
Yeah, I'll be here whatever time you want me.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just because of the 12 to 1 lunch.
Yeah.
And we should tentatively plan for hour and a half, 2 hours? What's your suggestion there?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just, I'm going to use something, I'll explain it to you on Saturday. But the way it works, it's a modified Delphi technique, and the way that works, you're going to be asked to compare each candidate to each of the other candidates. Okay? So there are 6 candidates, and I'll pick on the 6 of you. So in the first comparison, you're going to compare Cassie to Jerry, and you got to pick one of those 2. Then you're going to compare Cassie to Richard, and you got to pick one of those 2. Then Cassie to Chad, and so on. And you'll work through that, and then I'll collect that, and we'll see where you're at as a group. Then we'll start to discuss the candidates. Because what that will show is you're all seeing the world roughly the same, except John has one candidate quite a bit higher than everybody else. So John, talk to us about what you saw, what you heard that we missed. And that's and then we'll work through that to eventually we arrive at a majority of the board saying, here's the 3 that I think we ought to bring back.
Now, do we get 6 copies of this questions and we take notes?
That would be my suggestion, yes.
And are those public?
That I do not know.
I would think, I'll defer to Mr. Robichaud.
We were told that anything the board has, if they're written notes, they're public. You can kind of keep a side note, which is not public, but if you write on this thing, that we were told a long time ago that those are public.
Yeah, that would align with what I've heard in the past as well.
We can, Kathy, can we verify that with
Nicole is online.
Nicole? Hi, Nicole.
Can she hear us?
Nicole, can you hear us? Nicole, can you hear us? Mr. Olson, I'll work with Nicole and Kathy, and we'll try to find out either from MSBA or our legal attorney if that's public to everybody or if that would be considered our
But
work.
Jerry said we can make side notes on
For
a piece
yourself,
of paper, and that's mine, right?
your own personal note.
Yeah, your personal notes. I think the issue was that if I happen to write down here, I didn't like that person's tie, or, they were not appropriately dressed or something. That's what they're very concerned about. That's why this is critical, that you only have objective notes on yours, but, the side notes can be.
Side notes is.
That's what we were told.
Yes,
We'll find out for
that
certain.
aligns.
That'd be great.
We'll find out and let everybody know.
Let me just walk through a quick PowerPoint about interviewing, if I could. So I don't, many of you have interviewed others in your lives, your work lives, your professional lives. And so I don't mean this to bore you in any way, but sometimes it's just a little different in a public setting, contrasted what you might have experienced in the past. So first of all, you'll be interviewing in this room, correct? This works well. I have to consciously remind myself to look over here to my far right to get Cassie. So, just and make certain your nameplates are in front of you for the board. And then it also is helpful, Kathy, if you have a small tent the nameplate in front of them so that, oh, it's Brian, not Karsten, and that's, you know, so you, just a little help for that.
Ted and Kathy, for that, is there any reason why we can't condense these a little bit? Obviously, Todd doesn't need to be here.
Right.
That seat's open.
Good idea.
So that, at least we can, a little bit. help.
I
We
like
could all
that.
slide over.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Otherwise, you know, your candidate's kind of,
Okay.
Can I ask another question? Someone recommended to me during the interview process, if you have community members, that everything gets turned and the board, the candidate faces out and the board faces.
your call.
It's up to you though.
What was that again?
Well, if there are community members that come for the interviews, that way they can't see the candidate, they see their back. So we would flip-flop everything, and the candidate would be sitting like where Chad is, and then I'd set up the board this way. I don't know
Yeah,
if that's-
Kathy, my biggest issue with that is this is an open meeting today.
Yeah,
Granted,
Yeah.
Ted's not a candidate, but there's nobody out there.
okay.
And at the end of the day, it's the 6 of us that are going to make a
Right.
decision
Sure.
on who
So
that is.
you're comfortable with the setup then?
I'm comfortable
Okay,
with it. That's
that
just me.
works.
You know, people can see him coming in, they can see him on the
Yeah.
screens or whatever.
Okay.
I think we'll give them every opportunity to
just
be
make it a
heard.
little
You know,
closer.
or where they can
Yeah.
hear him, but I think we have to be the ones who
Okay.
determine which 2 or 3 are coming back
Yeah.
in a couple weeks, right?
Now, they're not speaking out there.
No.
No, it's a meeting, they're open, they're willing to, they can come and listen, but they are not speaking, correct?
Want to clarify that,
Yep.
yeah.
Mr. Chair, one other, if I can just comment on that too, is that, you know, if the candidate is facing the public, we don't know what kind of body language is going to be out there from that public.
Yeah.
And it might disturb and interrupt what the candidate's thought process is as he or she is talking to the board, so I'm more comfortable with this way also, Mr.
You're,
Chair.
this is my, I think, third time, might be fourth time in front of you, and you're very good to present to and to speak to, in that you make eye contact with people, and I just remind you to do that, and be affirming. You know, you want to draw that best interview out of them, so, you know, little head nods, whether you may or may not be 100% what you agree with, but be affirming of them to draw out that very best interview. Make certain you review, and you've got a paper blizzard, granted, make certain you review all the papers, all the applications, all the materials on each candidate prior to this Friday, prior to starting the interviews. So we've got our questions identified. Try to stick just to the questions asked. If the candidate obviously missed the question, you may want to redirect them, but try not to follow up. And I know there's going to be responses from candidates who are going, oh, wow, that triggers another thought on this same, save that. And you can do that in that second round interview. Otherwise, you're not going to get through all 12 questions if you do that.
In Ted, it's okay, I would assume that whoever asks 7, once that question is asked and answered, whoever is going to ask 8, they just jump in?
Yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
so-
need to say,
yeah,
Richard, okay, you're up next, or,
Right.
you know, John, or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
so
I mean,
Courtney asked the last question, and the candidate seems to be winding down, and Richard could say, I've got the next question, and then it'll flow.
Do we cut them off? We don't cut this?
No,
No.
no. However, you're jumping ahead of me, Richard, so thanks for doing that. It would be nice if someone on the board was a timer. Because as I sit here, I don't see a clock in front of me. And I don't want to be doing this, you know, when I'm interviewing. So someone that could maybe gently say, well, we're now 55 minutes into the interview. We've only asked 7 questions here. We've got 7 more to go. So be mindful of that over the next 20 minutes. Who could serve that role as our timer?
I could do that.
Thank you, Courtney.
I'm
Yeah,
happy to do that.
yeah. Okay, let's see here. Let's go back to this.
Oh, can we talk about it a little bit more? Should we do it per question, or should I
No.
think in chunks?
No, just as things begin to count down, if you get towards that 45 to 55 minute hour, use your own judgment on that.
Okay.
If you're 45 minutes in and you've asked 3 questions, I'd
Got it.
step in at that point and say, okay, we got
It's
to
gonna be a
pick up
long
the pace
day.
here.
Yeah, they're still in question 1, and we're halfway through the interview.
It's going to be a
Yeah.
long day.
Yeah, we've already covered these. Okay, It's
But
easy.
Ted, of these questions, we want to get through, like, he said, you're going to spend half hour on the first question. No,
No,
because we got people stacked up out there.
right,
Yeah.
right. We want to stay on time.
Now, I know it's premature, but the second round, is that more ad lib of saying, we don't,
Yes.
whatever question in my mind or
Right.
anybody else's mind?
We'll talk about that more, but Richard, what I like to do on the second round, a suggestion I have is, as you begin to wind down that conversation, have the board chair go around the table and say, Cassie, is there anything else that you would like to ask this candidate? And she said, no, I think we've got it covered. And then Jerry, how about you? No, I'm good. Richard, how about you? Yeah, I've got 3 things. That's your opportunity. You know what I'm saying? So that you make certain that everybody has had a chance to cross off everything on their list that they wanted to follow up with that candidate.
That
I
was
know
the
there's things
second
we
interview,
can't-
right?
Eh.
That was the second interview you were talking about? Not this week?
Say again?
When you were saying we'll go around the room and see if anyone
That's-
has, the second.
Second round.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry, Richard, go ahead.
But then there are certain questions we cannot ask.
That's this list coming up right here.
Oh,
Okay. Here's the list. Now, people will sometimes ask me, can I ask them about this? Yeah, you can ask them anything you want. However, should they bring a claim against you and the school district, there's a very high probability you're going to lose that claim, better known as a lawsuit. So here's the list: ancestry, nationality, race, religion, marital status, living arrangement, or children. And it's easy to fall into a trap on these sometimes, because the candidate will say, well, my ex-wife, she has custody of the kids, and oh, really? So how often do you get to see them? Now we're treading on thin ice there. So it's easy to fall into those traps. Just let them volunteer. If they do volunteer, you can take note of it and move on. Any type of financial credit rating or debt, though we can get into that later on their background. Type of discharge from the military or the branch served. So people will ask me, you were in the Army? Yes. That's it. You don't want to follow up and say, oh, were you in the artillery? Why do you ask? Yeah, I was. So, sex or sexual preference, arrest, political preference, any type of disability. And again, however, if the applicant brings it up, listen, you can take notes. My advice is don't follow up on that. And it's easy, again, to fall into that trap. So a few hints. Listen to what is said. That's always important. But listen to how it is said. How much passion and enthusiasm do they have? When I did screening interviews, there were times where candidates, I had to go back to taking notes because they were passionate about it and they had me captured listening to them. Well, that's how they're going to perform as superintendent as well. So not just what's said, but how it's said. Can they think on their feet? And is there anything off balance? Now, probably not in this first round since they're probably going to have the questions, but you might hear some interesting things.
Mr. Chair, just a question, Ted. How do you avoid the issue of, this is what I think the candidate said?
I don't know if what you can avoid that issue. Make your own note, and then when we get together to talk about narrowing the field, you can bounce that off your other board members. Because there are times when you will say, well, the candidate talked about raising achievement level for second graders, but I totally missed anything else.
Okay.
Is that what you heard? And then Cassie would say, no, the candidate talked about middle school and then went to an example using second graders. That's an example that I just recently encountered.
Thank you.
Yep.
yeah, Ted, of the list of, we're not supposed to ask, but if they know the list because, past superintendent. So, I'm going to tell you, I was in the Navy, I'm 54 years old, and I'm married with 10 kids. That's it.
Or you can say thank
They
you for your...
could go down that
Yeah,
whole list, I
yeah,
don't know
you
if they
can
do
say,
it or not.
or you can say thank you for your service, but where you can fall into that trap is, wow, how did you come up with names for those 10, you know? And then that leads to, no, just kind of steer clear of those. You're going to have lots of time when you name that one person to find out, you know, about their life journey and personal story, though. Most of the time, candidates are very willing to talk about that and share it. And I think you're going to find that in the second round interview when they come back. They're going to want to say, let me tell you about somebody who made a big difference in my life. You know, my dad or my stepmom or, you know, whatever it is. And they'll really open up and begin to give you things. Look for the fit for the school district, both now and in the future, and then obviously personality. How are they going to work with the different community members, with you as board members? I asked each of them a board member relationship question in my screening interview, and so be on the lookout for those things.
Ted, again, I'm sorry for the question, but can you ask him, how long do you plan to be here? That's not really the question, but
No, you can
longevity of,
Yeah, you can ask them that, and of course, Richard, my response as a candidate would be, are you prepared to give me a 10-year contract?
you know.
You know, so, but yeah, you can ask them that eventually, sure. Yeah. Be careful, if you ask that question, ask it of the candidate that's in their 20s, as well as the candidate that's in their 70s. See what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, right, yeah.
See what I'm saying? Okay. Got it. Jerry?
One question too, Ted, if I can, Mr. Chair. If that question should be asked of one candidate, are you supposed to ask it of all the candidates?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
But again,
That's the
we're not
reason
doing
I'm
that
saying,
this
don't,
week, right?
don't be selective on who you ask it of.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm cautious we ask that question.
yeah, ask that of every one of them. And that's one for the second round interview, if you're interested in that. That's one that you can certainly ask of the 3 during the second round interview.
Thanks.
Try to resist drawing conclusions after the interview. Now, there are going to be times that you're going to be very impressed, and that's okay. But try not to draw conclusions, well, that one is clearly at the top, and that, until after we've had a chance to go through the discourse on the afternoon of the 8th. Okay? I'm not going to talk about anything more of these except we'll be obviously deciding on which 3 to bring back. Remember, your feelings are important, but I want to take you back to the desired characteristics. Remember, you engaged the community. You reached out to them. You had over 500 people provide input in putting together those desired characteristics. So keep those in the front of your mind. Each of you are going to have individual opinions and feelings, but remember, you're here collectively as a body, as a school board, and you ask the community, you ask the staff for input, so honor that and keep those desired characteristics first and foremost in your mind. So that's pretty much it. We'll talk about the second round interview, a chance to, it's less formal. It's, they will have had a chance to get to know you. You will have had a chance to get to know them. So you can anticipate that they're going to ask you more questions, more things about the school district and about their future here in Faribault, and perhaps even about you as individual board members. So
So they
just be
can
aware
ask
of that
questions of
concern.
us.
Pardon me?
They can ask questions.
Sure they can in a
So
second.
what, do they have limits themselves or not about us?
I'm sorry if I missed that, Richard.
About, you know, if they've done the research,
Yeah.
can they ask, I mean, if they ask the
They-
same question from Cassie, do they have to ask me the same question?
No. Mm-mm. So they might ask Cassie, so I looked at, you know, what you do and how long you've been on the board, but I'm very interested, what motivated you to run for the board the first time? And they might ask you, Richard, you've served several terms. What drew you back to serve the school district? Different question for two different board members along the same line. So,
Because they know that they have a former superintendent here, too, so they might ask Jerry some superintendent questions? I don't know.
they might.
They may, but
Yeah,
I doubt
they
it.
might. I think most of them know Jerry or know of Jerry from my conversations with them. How's that make you feel, Jerry?
That's scary. Very scary. And they still apply?
All right, so I think we're pretty well ready to rock and roll on the 7th and 8th. And as I said, when we get together, I'm going to use this modified Delphi technique. I've already prepared the grid that you'll be confronted with on making those choices, and then we'll move it along and talk about each of the 6. And then eventually, Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, eventually I think you're going to want a motion on which 3 to invite back, or at least a head nod from 4 of the 6, if not everybody.
So the meeting on the 8th where we, after the interviews, is that a closed meeting or a public meeting?
It's an open meeting. as I
It's an open
understand.
meeting, okay. So then is there rules to how we refer to when we're talking about candidate A, candidate B,
None that I'm aware of.
not addressing them by name or?
Ted, do we run any issues? This is all new to me, so I ask it out of sheer ignorance, maybe. Do we run any issues in our dialogue post our meetings about internal candidates versus external candidates? Do we potentially, you know, how you mentioned in some of the things you can't ask candidates? I mean, you can ask them, but be prepared if they don't get the job, if they come filing a suit, you
Right.
might be in trouble.
Right.
Is there anything there that we should watch our Ps and Qs of when we speak about internal candidates as they're already on our payroll versus external candidates?
No,
Okay.
Chad, and that's part of the reason, even though you have 2 internal candidates, you want to give each of the 6 the same interview. And look for depth of understanding in the answer to the questions.
We have 90 minutes slotted. My preference would be to make sure we have 5 to 10 minutes at the end
At least,
so that all of us
at
can
least.
get another water or do whatever, stretch a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So just know that we do have 90 minutes slotted, but we shouldn't go the full 90 minutes.
So I think what I'll do is on my, I was just looking at the questions. I asked the 7th question, so I might do our time check before my question if we're running late.
Okay.
That would help that out to move us a little bit along. I
Good
have a
idea.
couple logistical questions.
Yeah.
If it's okay. Isn't it all possible for us not to take an hour lunch break on the 8th?
Sure call.
You want to just take a half hour? Or a
On
working
the
lunch?
8th?
Yeah, one or the other.
I'm going to have it catered, so it could be
Yeah.
a working lunch.
I'll be here. If we
Yeah.
want to, if we want to launch right in, we can start right
At 1
in.
o'clock, okay.
I think that would be really helpful for me.
Yeah.
I tried to do everything I could to protect this time, and I'm still kind of struggling to juggle everything this weekend. But I don't want to impose that on everybody else if you want to take an hour break and then.
Any issues, anybody?
So when we talk working lunch, are you going to be eating your lunch while we're talking, debating, talking and discussing?
I would classify that as a working lunch.
Yep, or we could take a shorter
Or we
lunch.
take a 15, 20-minute.
I just don't think a professional board with a decision of this magnitude should have
Yes.
that distraction, or that
Yeah.
distraction in front of us. Sorry.
We're
With that, so
disrupt the food.
I would like, so no, I would like no food up here, whatever, I think you need some time to disengage, to go back to grab a quick bite or whatever, the length of time. Most of us who were teachers had 15
Yeah.
or 20 minutes lunchtimes our whole life anyway, so.
That was really
Or none
what
at
I was
all.
imagining,
So, yeah.
is shortening that
So we'll
block.
try to shorten that, and we don't have to start at 1 if we're ready by 12:20, 12:30.
Yeah, if you're ready at 12:15, fine. If it's 12:30, whatever, I'll be here and we'll
Okay.
start when you're ready.
Sorry, are you talking, Courtney, about maybe moving that 1 to 2:30 from like 12:45 to 2:30? So we've moved the interviews up as well?
No, just the board debriefing, not waiting until 1 o'clock to
On
start.
Saturday.
But since that's a public meeting, that would have to, if we change that time, that would have to be
Yeah,
posted.
that's why I'm asking.
Just changing that time as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's move it up to 12:30.
Thank
Is
you,
that fair enough, everyone?
yes. That would be great.
Kathy, you'll update that?
Yep.
So that'll go 12 to 12:30, and then 12:30 we'll start our debriefing deliberations. Okay.
Can I ask a question, Ted?
Yes, please.
Will any of the candidates have presentations that they want to project?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Now, having said that, they may bring materials with them. No one's indicated that to me, but
Okay.
sometimes they do,
Okay.
and they would just distribute those at the time of their interview.
Kathy, will Drew be here, or who will be getting us up and live?
Drew will be with us all day Friday, and Casey Rutherford will be with us all day Saturday.
Okay, thank you. And then just back on the logistics, you're greeting the individuals when they come in, and you'll have them in a
Yes.
hosting room, if you will, or
Sure.
something? Awesome,
Perfect.
thank you.
And I did get a response from Nicole about the,
Our own notes.
yeah, the notes of general interviews are public and kept for 2 years. My understanding is that all board correspondence is public, but she will check with MSBA to be sure.
Okay, thank you.
Makes sense.
Mr. Bellion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to take and just ask yourself and Ted, so after the 8th till the 20th and/or 21st, we submitted, each board member so fully submitted a list of names, whatever, for community members, groups to meet candidates and all. When do those occur? I mean, we have a group of teachers, paras, custodians, that whole, can you give us a little more detail on that? And when their recommendation or their input would come back to the board?
Great question.
So you're going to have on that 20th, 3 candidates here, and there's a schedule. It's already ready to go. And I provided, and I could do it again, a few feedback forms that would be collected from that group to come back to you. And so then it's upon you, and I believe Nicole even volunteered to collect those and synthesize them, if you will, for your perusal as board members. Chad, is Jerry, I remember that conversation we had with Nicole, and I believe that's correct.
Yeah, correct. And I believe, I don't know if that entire schedule was sent out to everybody or not, but the 3 board, assuming we end up with 3 finalists, and they're all here, we would interview one of those finalists. At the same token, another finalist would be driven around town and shown the buildings. I believe we had reached out to Nort Johnson from the chamber, and then one principal was hopefully going to do that. Those 2 were going to tag team, a second candidate. And the third candidate would be being interviewed by a larger group. And my understanding is that larger group would be about 17, 18 people, give or take, so it's a sizable group. One of the things there that we discussed is that we believe the only room in this building to do that is essentially that back room, if you will, and we would partition that, and it's very soundproof, because we need to be in this room, because we need to be seen on TV, if you will, right? We need to have that capability. There would be approximately 7 to 8 staff members, and we would reach out to the bargaining groups to for them to find that out, or for them to nominate who would be on there. Ted and Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole, jump on if I say something incorrect here. I believe the teachers group would have 2, the principal bargaining group would have 1, and I think all the other bargaining groups would have 1, if they want. Then we would also, each one of us had nominated one community member, so each one of those people would be involved as well. I believe Dr. Parker from South Central College had expressed an interest. We're not certain if that day aligns with her calendar or not, but we would certainly make that offer. And then was there one parent or 2 parents as well? I think maybe 1 or 2 parents, but then there would also be 2 high school students, I believe, and we would reach out to the student council at the high school to identify those 2. So when it comes to staff, from our conversations, when Jerry and Ted and Nicole and I meet every Wednesday, we didn't want to be the ones picking staff. We wanted to involve those bargaining groups and make sure they identified somebody from their group that would be interested. So that's how we would get to that 17, 18 number. Correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Does that answer? Is that what you're?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to lay out again, I have read all
Yeah.
that, but again, I just want to know when and how all that was going to transpire.
Yeah, so what I don't know, though, is Ted has anything, and maybe this is Kathy and maybe this is Nicole, of the 7 community members, Carolyn had probably submitted one as well, but of those 6 or 7 community members, when do they get the invite, and when do we find out if they can make it or not make it?
She hasn't spoken to me about
Okay,
any of that.
okay, so that maybe hasn't been done quite yet, and that'll have to be done sooner than later, because really, we're asking somebody to basically give up their entire work Thursday
Yep.
to do that.
Yeah.
And that may not work for everybody.
I know when I asked the community member whose name I submitted, I asked that individual, I said, it's possibly going to require a full day of your time, and so they were aware of that. I have another question, Ed. For the staff people that are coming, the classroom teachers, we know the issue with substitutes. Are we able to find enough subs to cover those classrooms? I wonder, are we putting the principals in a real difficult position? Because one of them will be here interviewing, and I think one is also going to be an escort around the community. So it's interesting to see what will come out of that dilemma. I guess I don't expect anybody here to answer that question. It may put our principals in a real bind.
Great question. How are we doing?
I think you're ready. Ready. Enjoy the interviews.
Thanks.
Yeah, enjoy the interviews. And like I said, draw the best interview out of each of the 6 that you can draw. They're going to be nervous. I mean, put yourself in their shoes, so.
No, will you be here?
I will not.
You will not.
I will not. And Richard, let me tell you why. I've learned this through experience. There are 2 reasons. One, when the candidate leaves the interview, they'll turn to me and say, so how did I do?
Yes.
Well, my thinking's done. You know, I've done my screening over the last 2 months. It's not important what I think. And even more dangerous, candidate walks out of the interview and one of you will come up and say, well, what do you think? Oh, no, this is not my decision. This is your decision now.
But you're not going to be online.
No,
No, nothing, zip.
no,
You're
no,
going to be fishing someplace.
nope.
Well, he'll be here for Saturday afternoon,
I will be here, yeah, plenty of time. so,
but not with any candidate.
No.
Okay.
So, yeah, the candidates are all prepped. And I'll reinforce with them again that they have no more than 75 minutes is what I'm going to tell them. That will give you at least 15 minutes, and you're going to need that in the interviews. So.
Ted, question for you, since as of now, these 6 candidates are now publicly outed, if you will, that they've applied for this.
Yes.
Is it a no-no to, once again, I only picked Karsten because he's on top alphabetically, no other reason. Karsten's currently at Red Wing, and so-and-so knows somebody at Red Wing.
Right.
Is it a no-no to reach out to a teacher in Red Wing and say, hey, what would your thoughts be on Mr. Anderson and his performance?
Yep. Given that this is now public, that would be okay. Now, Chad, when I meet with you on the afternoon of the 8th, and we narrowed it to 3, you're going to get some additional homework to call references on each of the 3 candidates. Now, not all of 6 of you will need to call on all 3. We'll, many hands make the work light, so we'll divide it up. 2 board members to call on candidate A, figure out who to call here, and we'll talk about that. So certainly you can start with a reference they have listed, but if you know of someone, or if you call that reference they have listed, at the end of chatting with them, ask them, who would you suggest that I also call? So move on to that second line of reference, as opposed to just those that the candidates listed on their application materials. That will be with the final 3. And that will be something that you will do so that you hear it firsthand what folks have to say about that particular candidate. And then we'll share that amongst the 6 of you. So if John called on candidate A, you'll have a chance to say, here's what I learned. I talked to this person and to this person. Here's what I learned.
So Ted, we don't call before the interviews?
Probably not. Probably
Until
not.
the 3 are picked?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Ted, you probably have found that once these names are public, which they will be, that there's going to be calls unofficially to those local districts to ask the question you're talking about.
Yeah.
And, what do you think about Robichaud? What kind of a job did he do? I would never hire him again.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's no way of preventing that from
Yeah, I'll guarantee you Google is busy right now. if you
Well,
know
we have
what
to
I
be
mean.
careful about bias too, right? If, one of us has friends at each district and we don't have kind of a balance, we've got to be
Yeah.
cautious about that too.
And, all 6 of these people have connections here locally. They're not from that far away, so your degrees of separation are maybe 2 or 3 before you run into somebody that's aware of that candidate.
Ted, one thing that hasn't come up today, but it's certainly come up with all of us, is the potential of this individual living in our district.
Yes.
I know it wasn't actually, I don't believe it was listed on there of, don't ask those. We've been told not to ask those.
Well,
If we really wanted to get into that, we would get into that in the negotiations phase.
you
Would that be
could.
correct?
It's not a prohibited question.
It's not a what, I'm sorry?
It's not a prohibited question, but you can't make a hiring decision based on that. So let me just share with you what candidates told me, because I'm not making the decision on their employee. Anne Marie lives in the district. Ron Wagner, absolutely. Yeah, that's part of the reason I'm applying. I want to live in Faribault. Brian Boyson, daughter that's a junior in Austin, and doesn't want her, she wants to finish her high school in Austin. After that, he's very open to move. Jamie, you know Jamie's situation, and he's indicated to me he will address that at the end of his interview. He called and talked to me about that very issue and wanted to know about addressing that issue at the end of the interview. And I said, that's your call. It wouldn't surprise me, is what he does. Karsten, yes. He's probably going to rent here initially. And part of the reason is a family situation and significant other. And so he's going to move here. And his sons live quite a distance away. Faribault is like halfway to his sons from Red Wing. And he has a significant other who's has a very good role that she plays in Red Wing. So he would be here in Red Wing. Joe Brown, yes, he would move here. He's told me that several times. Yeah, absolutely, I'd move to Faribault. So that's what I know about them. That's all they told me. I'm just telling you what they told me.
Anything else? I would just like to say that a big thank you to Ted and Jerry and Nicole. We've met every Wednesday for the better part of, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 weeks, 8 o'clock Wednesday mornings. For me, it's been very informational and hopefully helpful for us getting the rest of the board information. And I don't know how you would feel about that, or Jerry or Nicole, but for me, as a rookie at this, it's been very, very informational. And
We would be here at least another hour working through logistics if it wasn't for those meetings occurring.
And really a huge thank you to Nicole.
Absolutely.
Doing a lot of this stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
And also Kathy, as they work together and get this stuff listed and formatted and all that. So anyway, just a huge thank you.
That's awesome, thank you.
Yeah, we would still be talking about what to do for the second round interviews at this point of our meeting here tonight. And that's all been decided. The schedule's been put to rest, and the schedule for the 7th and 8th is all finalized, right down to who's greeting them. And
It was a very productive.
it was a good use of time.
One last Ted, I don't know if it's the last question, but did we get any applications from outside the state?
Yes.
You know, so,
Okay. North Dakota, Illinois, Vermont, Richard, I'd have to go back in and look at the applicant files, but those three come off the top of my head.
but they did not make the cut because of just,
Wisconsin? I'm just thinking, you know, as I'm going back through my reflection, so at least those 4 states outside of Minnesota.
Just to reiterate, the 7th and the 8th is this Friday, Saturday, and then we have the 20th, which is a Thursday, which will be pretty much a full day. Friday morning, the 21st, and then that following Monday, the 24th, is our board meeting, I believe, and that's where we'll hopefully, I believe, right, Ted, we'll take an action item and hopefully approve of our new superintendent. Is that correct?
Yes, so just thinking in advance, likely at that meeting, you would name a preferred candidate. You probably won't have a contract finalized, but you would name a preferred candidate dependent upon perhaps an investigative background check, perhaps successful negotiation of a contract.
so the 24th is not set in stone. It could be the next,
Well, that would be our board meeting. Yeah, it maybe would take a month to finish negotiations and then investigative background check or something. So maybe that would then, the final approval, assuming everything comes back and you can successfully negotiate a contract, would then maybe be in February. Would that be fair?
Yeah.
What else?
Need a
Anything
motion to
else?
adjourn.
Thank you, Ted.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. See you twice more. Good luck on the 7th. It'll be interesting to to listen to you after you've had a chance to meet these 6 and speak with them. I've spent a lot of time, depends upon the candidate, but my screening interviews lasted anywhere from 60 to 75 minutes with virtually everybody. So I've had a chance, besides countless number of texts and phone calls and emails, answering questions for them, and they're answering questions for me. So now it's your chance.
If nothing else, Ted, thank you. We appreciate all your efforts and the information today. And with that, I'll move to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bellingham, a second by Ms. Cavalier. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you.
When this pandemic certainly.
Yeah.
Welcome. It is 5:30. Welcome to everybody, and thank you for joining us here on January 3rd at our organizational meeting. Since we have had a board member resign who was the acting clerk, I'm going to ask Mr. Bellingham, our vice chair, to act as the clerk until we elect a new clerk. So, Mr. Bellingham, would you please determine if we have a quorum present?
Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum present of the membership.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. With that said, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Bellingham, for leading us in the pledge. This brings us to item 5, the approval of the agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion by Mr. Robichaud, a second by Ms. Steves. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Please, if I happen to say 7-0 at some point tonight, well, I don't know that I'll say it anymore. But if somebody says that, just anybody, please chime in and correct them. This brings us to item 6, the election of officers for 2022. With that, I will entertain a motion. And just so everybody knows, I will ask 3 times for every position if there's a nominee for each position, so I'll do that for each position. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to elect the chair. Mr.
I
Robichaud?
will nominate Chad Wolf for chair. I think Mr. Wolf has done a extensively diligent job in working with us through the pandemic and all that that has brought, and plus his extensive communication with the public has been unapproachable.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Robichaud, for those words. I'll entertain a motion for the nomination of a chair. I'll entertain one more nomination for the chair. Okay, thank you.
So now you need to have somebody make a motion for Mr. Wolf as chair, and then somebody to second it, and then vote on it.
Okay, that gets correct.
Yeah. Okay, so do we have a motion? Sorry, Todd, I actually watched the MSBA presentation, and I thought they said if you only have one, you can do it through acclamation.
You're probably right.
But I'm not smart enough to know what that word means, so we'll go through the motion in the second process. So, Mr. Robichaud nominated myself.
I will move that we elect Mr. Wolf as the chair.
Thank you for that.
I'll second that motion.
So we have a motion by Mr. Robichaud, a second by Ms. Cavalier. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I will abstain. So that is 5-0. This brings us to election of officers for the vice chair. I will entertain a nominee for the vice chair.
I nominate John.
Okay.
I'll second that nomination.
Before that, I need to, excuse me. Before that, I need to ask 2 more times if there's any other nominees for the vice chair. Is there another nominee for the vice chair? I'll ask one more time. Is there another nominee for the vice chair? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for Mr. Bellingham to serve as the vice chair for
I
2022.
nominate John Bellingham for vice chair.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Olson, a second by Mr. Robichaud. All those in favor, please signify by saying, I'm sorry, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes
I'll abstain.
5-0. Thank you. This brings us to item 6C, the election of the clerk. I'll entertain a nomination of the clerk.
Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate Cassie Steves.
Okay, thank you. I will entertain a nomination of the clerk. I will entertain a nomination of the clerk. Okay, so now I will entertain a motion for the approval of Ms. Steves to serve as the clerk.
Also move that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
5.
You're abstaining?
Yep.
Okay, motion passes 5-0. Thank you. So at this time now, Mr. Bellingham, she will take over as the clerk. Thank you for serving those duties tonight.
Immediate.
All right, this brings us to item 6D, the election of the office, of the treasurer, excuse me. Excuse me.
I will nominate Courtney Cavalier.
Mr. Robichaud has nominated Courtney Cavalier as the treasurer. I will ask again, are there any other nominees for the treasurer? Last time, are there any other nominees for the treasurer? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve Ms. Cavalier as the treasurer.
So moved.
Second.
A motion has been made by Mr. Robichaud, a second by Mr. Olson. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You abstaining? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Thank you for everybody willing to serve in these positions for this calendar year of 2022. With that, real quickly, before I move ahead, I want to ask the board if you have a preference on how we do our motions when we take each one. I've done it one way this past year. I know other board chairs have done it other ways. So when we get to an item, and if there's not a lot of detail on here, I would often ask Superintendent Sesker to talk a little bit about that item. This past year, I asked him to do that prior to a motion being made. Would you like to continue that way, or would you rather have a motion made in a second before Superintendent Sesker then gives a description of that item? And then we have additional discussion.
Mr. Chair, Robert's Rules of Orders, which these meetings are governed by, does say that a motion should be made first and seconded before discussion occurs. Just for clarity within the meeting, for sticking to the motion, that discussion is germane to the motion, et cetera. And my belief is it does does make sure that board members are prepared prior to coming to the meeting. If you have a question about the particular item on the agenda, whatever, then contact the superintendent, and he or she can refer to the appropriate cabinet people or questions there. So that would be my suggestion, recommendation.
So that would be a little bit different than what we've done in the past. And should a person who made the motion or seconded it decide to change their mind after hearing that presentation or getting something answered, they would then look to withdraw their motion or amend something. Okay? So going forward, we will now look to entertain a motion in a second before we get into the deeper details, if you will. Fair enough? Okay, thank you. This brings us to item 7, school board schedule of meetings for 2022. I believe everybody has that. I will entertain a motion to approve the schedule as presented in front of us.
Mr. Chair, I'll so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bellingham, a second by Ms. Cavalier. Superintendent Sesker, would you like to point anything out in this?
Yeah, there's one on there, I believe, is the February 22nd meeting?
Yes.
Yeah. February 22nd is a Tuesday because the 21st is President's Day. So it's a little bit, that's the only one that's off on the Monday, is that one Tuesday night meeting. Other than that, it's pretty, we try to stick as close as we can to the second and fourth Mondays unless there's another conflict, and it's on the other Monday.
And Superintendent Sesker, President's Day, we cannot have a board meeting due to statute.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, any further questions regarding the proposed school board's meeting schedule? Okay, hearing none, we do have a motion by Mr. Bellingham, a second by Ms. Cavalier. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. This then brings us to item 8, which is committee assignments. Over the past week, I sent out kind of a attendance, if you will, of those committees. We want to make sure they work for everybody. And I would just say, I think we want to make sure that not only they work for school board members, but hopefully any staff members that are on those committees, as well as community members at large. So with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the committee assignments.
Can I just interject?
Yeah.
This one might be a little bit different.
Yes.
Because you don't have the exact motion on the floor yet.
Right.
So you may need to have a discussion to figure out where people would want to be on the
No,
committee.
that's-
So I would suggest doing it that first.
Yeah, okay.
Unless you wanted a motion to discuss the, but we don't have to go
No,
that
that's
route.
fine.
No.
Okay, so, Ms. Zavarol, you have, let's just, at least on my document, I'm not sure if your document matches exactly the same or not. Let's just start at the top with finance. That committee is chaired by Mr. Gerdes. And we can have up to, and once again, on all of these, we can still have up to 3 members, correct? Up to 3 members. And we should also be cognizant of the fact that we will be appointing a 7th board member likely in March. So we will want to save likely something for this individual. So this past year in 2021, on the Finance Committee, it was Ms. Cavalier, myself, and Mr. Bellingham. And the way this has historically worked, if you're interested, you express an interest. If we end up with 4 people, we do rock, paper, scissors. No, we don't. But I get to choose as the chair of who then gets to serve on that committee. So who would like to, I think the treasurer would naturally serve as on that finance committee.
Yes, I would like to stay on the committee.
Okay. I'm listed second on here. I don't know that it's a requirement by any means at board chair, but I certainly do enjoy being on that committee. So I would express an interest in being on it, continuing to serve on that committee if people are okay with that. And then Mr. Bellingham?
Yes, and in my opinion here, I do believe that board chair and treasurer should be on the finance committee. And also, if we correlate with the negotiations team, I think it's important as well. Who is ever on the negotiations committee probably should also be linked to the finance committee with those things as well. So I would be willing to serve on that again.
Okay, do we have anybody else from the board that is interested in the finance committee? Okay, hearing no one, Ms. Zavarol, if you would, we'll leave it to 3 there. Okay. The next item on here is Schools for Equity in Education, otherwise known as C. Mr. Robichaud, you were on that last year.
Yes.
Would you like to continue?
I would.
Would anybody else like to continue? Or, I'm sorry, would anybody else like to be added to that? Okay, Mr. Robichaud, it sounds like that one is yours and yours alone. Insurance Committee, and once again, if you have an interest and you want to know when these meet, make sure you please ask and we'll get those answers for you. The Insurance Committee was myself and Mr. Bellingham. I would enjoy still staying on this committee. Mr. Bellingham, would you?
It's very interesting and complicated, the insurance piece, so yes, it's a learning curve, to be honest with you, so yes, I would like to stay on that.
Would anybody else want to be added to that? Pardon me. Okay, I'm only hearing two. Same as. The next one is negotiations. It was myself, Ms. Cavalier, and Mr. Bellingham. And I would, as chair, like to continue on this committee for another year. Ms. Cavalier?
I'm happy to stay or happy to cede my spot to someone else to work on negotiations.
Okay. Mr. Bellingham?
Having some experience within the negotiations, I would like to stay on that, if we could.
Okay. Do we have anybody else that has an interest in being on the negotiations? Okay. Superintendent Sesker, do you believe there's better value in having 3 of us versus 2 or 2 versus 3?
I don't, no, either way is fine, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Nicole and Scott do most of the work, honestly.
Courtney, would you like to continue?
I think I ended up on one too many committees last year, so let's just wait to, if you don't mind,
Okay.
if we can get till the end and I can see how it rounds out. But yes, I would definitely love to continue to serve
Okay.
in negotiations.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to policies, policy oversight. This past year, it was Mr. Bellingham, Ms. Treadway, and Ms. Steves. Mr. Bellingham, would you like to continue in this?
I think I'd like to do that, yes, very much.
Okay, Ms. Treadway has resigned. Ms. Steves, yep, sorry, real quick, Mr. Olson. Ms. Steves, would you like to
Yep.
continue? Okay. Yes, Mr. Olson.
I would like to be on that policy committee.
Okay. Anybody else like to be on that policy committee? Okay, I am hearing Mr. Bellingham, Ms. Steves, and Mr. Olson. That brings us to the facilities committee. This past year, it was Mr. Robichaud, Mr. Olson, and Ms. Cavalier. Mr. Robichaud, would you like to continue on that committee?
Yes.
Mr. Olson, would you like to continue on that committee?
Yes, please.
And Ms. Cavalier, would you like to continue on that committee?
I love being on the facilities committee, but I think we should consider, I've been on it for 3 years, either you, our chair, coming back onto the committee, or someone else moving on, so I can give someone else a chance.
Okay, so I am hearing Mr. Robichaud and Mr. Olson. Is that committee meeting in person or virtual?
That's virtual.
Still like the third Thursday of every month at 4 o'clock?
Yep.
Could we make that in person? Try to switch it? Any?
We can talk about it at the next meeting and see what everybody thinks.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
doesn't matter to me either way.
it'll be Mr. Robichaud and Mr. Olson. Why don't we not put me on it yet? Let's let it play out, and potentially I will join it, potentially I will leave it in case the new appointee would have an interest. This brings us to the cooperative agreements. Alexander Park was Mr. Olson and Ms. Cavalier. These cooperatives, some of them are very infrequent, if you will. Mr. Olson, would you like to continue on the Alexander Park?
I don't think we met last year.
Who leads
I've
that?
never met with anyone for the Alexander Park.
Well, this sounds like it's something the policy committee needs to look at and take care of. Who is the chair of that? Excuse me? Is that with us and the city?
Usually, yeah, Kane would go to those meetings, but do you know, Scott, if Kane has been to, have they had any of those meetings yet?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. We have to go back and check.
I believe that's with Paul Panonsky, isn't it?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought your document showed that there was a meeting last year and that you went, Mr. Olson. The one that you sent, the attendance? Because I was worried about it because I didn't go.
Well, maybe we can find out exactly who's on it, but Mr. Olson, would you be willing to continue?
Sure, why
Okay.
not?
Ms. Cavalier, would you be willing to continue if they do meet?
I would love to consider one of the other cooperative agreements if anybody is going to change on the other ones.
Okay. Anybody else interested in the Alexander Park? Okay, for now it'll be you, Mr. Olson. The next item is the cooperative agreement for the ice arena. Ms. Steves, you were at last year?
Yeah, so they met 4 times, and unfortunately, the meetings don't align with my family schedule.
When do they generally meet?
Wednesdays at 5:45 at night.
And is that Mr. Paul Panansky that leads that as well? Okay. So it doesn't work for you, so I'm thinking you would not want to be on it for 2022?
No.
Would anybody else be willing to serve in that role?
Did you say there were nighttime meetings?
They're only 30 or so minutes. It just doesn't work with my schedule.
4 times a year? I could take that one instead.
Okay.
I would be willing to trade.
So trade, you'll go with Mr. Olson on the Alexander Park? And you'll take the ice? Okay. Would anybody else like to be on that ice arena board? Cooperative agreement board, I guess. Okay, thank you for that. Next item is the soccer committee. That was myself and Ms. Treadway, and I believe last year we met 1 time. Once again, I think it was probably about 6 o'clock on a Wednesday night. I'll continue to serve on it if that's okay. Would anybody else like to be on that?
Mr. Chair, we could leave some of these spots open for appointee in
Yep.
March. I realize it's a couple, 3 months down the road here, but
Perfect. We'll, I mean, and
Yeah.
whoever the appointee is can obviously be a second on these, so.
yeah, thank you.
Okay. The State High School League, Mr. Bellingham, that was you last year.
Yes, I'd love to do it again.
You'll continue. I don't know that we've ever had more than one. Does anybody else want to be on that as well? Okay, Mr. Bellingham. The next item is the Cannon Valley Special Education Co-op, and that was Mr. Robichaud serving as the primary and Ms. Treadway as the alternate. Mr. Robichaud, would you like to continue as the primary?
Sure, yes. I would.
Okay. Would anybody like to?
I'd like to be the alternate,
You will be? Okay, Ms. Cavalier, the alternate.
if that's okay.
Anybody else interested in that position? Okay. Ms. Zavarro, do you have that? Thank you. That brings us to the Wellness Committee that is chaired by Ms. Leland. Mr. Robichaud and Ms. Steves, you were both on that last year. Would you like to continue this year?
Yep.
Yes. Anybody else want to be on that? Okay. Sounds like those two are up again. The next item is the District Advisory Committee, chaired by Ms. Corcoran. Last year it was Ms. Treadway, Ms. Cavalier, and Mr. Robichaud. Ms. Cavalier, would you like to continue in that role?
Sure, I just want to make sure I understand. So we have decided to return to the split of the 2 committees, which means we need to fill the spots for the Community Education Council as well, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that's how it was 2 years ago?
Yep.
Okay, how it originally started. Yes, I'd like to stay on District Advisory.
Okay, Mr. Robichaud?
Yes.
Okay, anybody else from this board want to be on that as well?
I'm interested.
You will be? Okay, so we'll have Ms. Steves on there as well. Thank you. So that brings us to the, if you will, recreated Community Education Advisory Council that is chaired by Ms. Leland. Who would like to serve on this?
When do they meet?
4 times a year. And I have a flexible schedule that I put out because I have so many community members that join that meeting that I typically have 2 slots. So I have not planned the upcoming one. But I try to make it flexible so everybody gets a chance to participate.
I'll do that.
Okay, Mr. Bellingham? Anybody else?
So I think I attended in December, maybe, November.
Yep.
But I wasn't sure if I was wearing my chamber hat or my school board hat. So I'm more than happy to,
Okay,
Let Cassie
there
have
too.
it then.
well, we can have 2 on there,
You
or
can
is
have
that
2
just
on.
one?
Yeah,
Okay.
We can have 2, Mr. Bellingham and Ms. Steves?
2. You can have 2.
Okay, Mr. Bellingham and Ms. Steves.
I
Thank you.
think that's a great group of people. It's a great committee, great group of interesting people, and you 2 would be fabulous addition to the.
Okay. The next item is the Evaluation Superintendent Evaluation Committee, which was myself, Ms. Treadway, and Mr. Olson. I will continue on this? Mr. Olson, would you like to continue on this?
No, I'll
No?
pass on this
Okay.
one.
Mr. Robichaud?
I would be willing to serve on that.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'd also be interested, but I think if, I need to balance out making sure with the facilities and negotiations what we decide.
I will tell you, this one generally doesn't take a whole lot of time. We usually plan on a midterm eval, which will be later in January, early February. And then, usually in that July, August timeframe, so that there's now new goals for that upcoming year, if you will. So not a whole lot of time, to be honest with you.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay, so Ms. Zavarro, it'll be myself and Mr. Robichaud and Ms. Cavalier.
Can we go real quickly back?
I'm sorry, yep.
No, just to make sure I got this right. For the District Advisory Committee, Cass, are you going to be on that one? So you're going to be on both, the district and the community? Okay. All right, got it. Thanks.
Okay. The next one on here is the Falcon Enrichment Education Program, otherwise known as FEEP. This past year was Ms. Steves. Would you like to continue in this committee?
So unfortunately, that also does not align with my schedule.
Okay.
They meet once a month, Monday.
It's usually, actually Tuesday morning at 7 a.m., so a little morning meeting. It's about
That's
an
how much
hour.
it aligns with my
Still
schedule.
won't work?
Yeah.
However, I do have one question on this. I just want to make sure that anybody that decides to step up and be on this committee, the board member that represents or that sits on this committee, do they have a vote on whatever, or they do not?
They do not. No,
They do
they're
not.
an
So-
ex officio.
So the purpose of them going is to just help
Yep.
understand what's going on there?
Yep, a communication piece between the board and the committee. It's
Okay.
kind of a branch of the FAPSETA too.
Okay, gotcha.
Would it be possible to only have one person on that committee then?
Mhm.
If
Yeah.
it's ex officio?
Yeah.
Yep, I'm there all the time, and then John was there for a while, and then Cassie was there. They only meet 5 times now, probably 5 or 6 times.
So with that said, sounded like Tuesday mornings at 7?
Mhm.
Does that fit in somebody's schedule? The new appointee.
New appointee.
Can't wait.
Hope they're not too busy at that time.
Mr. Chair, I really could not volunteer for this committee because I'm the president of FAPSETA, which is the overarching responsibility for me. So
Okay,
that's why I'm not volunteering.
okay.
Is a FEEP meeting coming up shortly? I mean, will be one in February? Sorry.
Yeah, I think it is February.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the applications go out this semester for teachers. And then they come into the FEEP committee to present their grants, and then.
I think it's very important we have board membership on this, so I'll volunteer
Okay.
for that. And if the new appointee wishes to come on at that point, it certainly may.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Zavarro, you have Mr. Bellingham? Okay, thank you. The next item on here is the Mental Health Committee, which Ms. Steves and myself participated on this past year. Ms. Steves, would you like to continue on this?
I would, yes.
Yes, okay. And I would as well. We can have up to 3 if anybody else is really interested. We typically meet at, well, it's been changed now. Is it now 2:30 to 3:30 or something, or 3:30 to 4:30?
3:15 to
3:15,
4:15, yeah.
it's on a Wednesday afternoon. Anybody else interested?
Wednesday afternoon?
Wednesday afternoon, it is all virtual.
Oh, it's all virtual.
Yep, there's a lot of
Other partners.
outside
Yeah.
partners that are involved in it.
Okay. Maybe I'll try that.
Okay?
Okay.
So Ms. Steves, myself, and Mr. Olson. And then the Equity Committee, this past year, it was Mr. Robichaud. Would you like to continue? Okay, and would anybody else like to continue on this? Or, I'm sorry, start out on this? No? Okay,
You mean we could add more people onto it?
I believe we can.
Yep.
How often do they meet, Jerry?
It's probably a couple of times a month.
Once a month.
Once a month, I'm sorry. Yes.
It's typically the first Monday of the month.
Usually about late afternoon.
Okay, I think I gotta wait to figure out if I'm on facilities and negotiations before I volunteer for that.
Okay, and once again, we can ask the appointee what areas of interest she or he may have once we get there, so. Ms. Everald, is everything look pretty well filled in on your side? Okay.
Okay, so so Mr. Wolf, would you like to take the spot on facilities?
What was that, excuse me?
She was asking if I would like to get on the facilities. 4 o'clock on Thursdays.
Because I think if we're going to leave it for the new appointee, I'd like to stay on facilities.
Yeah. So my issue is in January and February, since I'm coaching 8th grade boys basketball, I will not be able to make those 2 meetings. If you want to stay on them through January and February, and then if you want me to pick it up in March, I'd be willing to do that. But it doesn't do me any good to join for January and February, and I know I can't be there.
Okay, why don't we do that and I'll stay on negotiations? Sound good?
Fair enough?
Yep,
So you'll be on facilities to start the year?
yep. And then Kathy, keep me
Okay.
on negotiations. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so now that I think we have all that filled out, now I will entertain a motion to approve the committee assignments as we discussed.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion by Mr. Olson, a second by Ms. Steves. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. The next item is number 9, school assignments. I apologize, I'm just pulling it up. If you remember, last year I had Jefferson Elementary, Ms. Treadway had Lincoln, Ms. Steves had Roosevelt, Mr. Bellingham had the middle school, Mr. Olson had the high school, Ms. Cavalier had the ALC, and Mr. Robichaud had McKinley Early Childhood and the ABE, Adult Basic Education. Would anybody like to change? We can, or we don't have to.
I'd like to change. I think the ALC is fabulous, but that's been my assignment for 3 years. So I'd like to change it up, plus they're in a big change time period too, so it would be a good time to change.
Do you have a preference, elementary or middle school or high school or something else?
No, I could swap with Carolyn's spot if it makes sense for now, or if the other people are interested in moving around. My sons go to Roosevelt, so I don't think I should be the Roosevelt.
Okay. Mr. Olson?
I'd like to stick with the high school, please.
You'd like to stick with high school, okay? Mr. Robichaud?
I'm fine with the early childhood.
Okay. Ms. Steves?
I'm fine with Roosevelt. My son goes to Lincoln, so I'll stay out of there.
Okay. Mr. Bellingham?
I like middle school.
Okay. And I'll stick with Jefferson. So what we'll
Why
do.
don't I'll stay with both schools until we have a new appointee.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And then I'll work with the new appointee and we'll decide together. And if I stay with the ALC, that's great.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'll entertain a motion to approve the school assignments as discussed.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Olson, a second by Ms. Cavalier. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. The next item is number 10, school board salaries. I will entertain a motion to approve school board salaries as presented.
So moved.
I can second that.
We have a motion by Mr. Olson, a second by Ms. Cavalier. They're in front of you. I believe this is consistent with what we've had for at least the last several years. Any further discussion on this? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed?
No?
Motion passes 5-1. Okay, thank you. Next item is Number 11, consider approval of business office annual resolutions 22-01 through 22-08 for fiscal year 2022. If people are okay with it, I wouldn't mind doing them all at one time. If you're not okay with it, we'll separate it out and put Cassie to work, or Ms. Steves to work over there. Is everybody okay with doing it all at once or no?
Well, Mr. Chair, on one hand, it would be efficient to do them all in one, but second, since a lot of these are our local banks, et cetera, it might be good to have the general public know where we are investing and do business with, et cetera. So I'm okay either way with that, but I guess that's just the depositories and the official publication and things like this, so just a thought on my part. It is on board book, so the general public can look up on board book as well.
Okay. With that said, I will entertain. Together. Yeah. Yep. With that said, I'll entertain a motion to approve the annual resolutions of 22-01 through 22-08. Once again, as Mr. Bellingham said, all this information is attached for the public to see in our board book. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Also move.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bellingham, a second by Ms. Cavalier. Any further discussion on these?
Are we voting all these in here?
No, not yet. No, those are 22.
Oh, these resolutions, oh, forget,
Yeah.
okay, sorry.
Yeah. We don't want to get this night over too early. So we have a motion by Mr. Bellingham, a second by Ms. Cavalier to approve the business office annual resolutions of 22-01 through 22-08. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Steves, will you please do a roll call?
Yep, John Bellingham,
Aye.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. Chad Wolf.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Wonderful, thank you. The next item is number 12, consider approval of the local education agency representative, otherwise known as LEA. I will entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Bellingham, a second by Ms. Cavalier. Any further discussion on this? Otherwise, Superintendent Sesker can give us a brief synopsis. It is out there in board book. It is, we do this every single year. Superintendent Sesker, you want to just mention briefly?
Yeah, it's just a connection from Minnesota Department of Education with Tracy Cochran, who does a lot of our grants and a lot of the different things that happens with MDE. They just need a local education agent, and then we've always just used our Director of Teaching and Learning, which in this case is Tracy.
Okay, wonderful. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. The next item is number 13. Consider approval of Resolution 22-09, designating Todd Sesker as identified official authority for Minnesota Department of Education secure websites. I will entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Robichaud, a second by Ms. Steves. Superintendent Sesker, once again, this is an annual. Anything you'd like to add about this?
Yeah, the Department of Ed is very touchy about who gives who permission to go to different areas. So for example, SERVS is our financial system that we use for flow between dollars between state and the school district. So they would ask me to designate a certain person that can access SERVS, and so in this case, obviously it's Scott. So then I have to go to a website, Scott's name is in there, and then I approve it, and then the Department of Ed approves it. So I'm that designee.
Wonderful, thank you. Any further discussion on this item?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr.
Are
Olson.
we going to have to take another vote to take off Todd's name when we hire?
Yes.
Yeah, there'll be a list of several of these that Ms. Zavril will be on top of. I'm sure.
Okay,
Yeah, several of these will have to be changed.
change with Todd.
Great question.
Department of Ed will not let me do this after July.
Something tells me you don't want to. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Steves, will you please do a roll call?
Yep, John Bellingham,
Aye.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. Chad Wolf,
Aye.
motion passes 6-0.
Wonderful, thank you. Brings us to item 14, consider approval of Resolution 22-10, designating Catherine Zavril as identified official authority for Minnesota Department of Education secure websites to add and remove names only for Faribault Public Schools. I will entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Olson, a second by Ms. Cavalier. Superintendent Sesker, anything you want to add that's not stated here?
Not really. I mean, Kathy can basically do this for me if I'm not around.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Steves, will you please do a roll call?
John Bellingham,
Aye.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. Chad Wolf,
Aye.
motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Next item is 15, consider approval of giving board chair authority to contact school district attorney of record for consultation and information. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bellingham and a second by Mr. Robichaud. Any further discussion, Superintendent Sesker?
This just gives Chad the authority to, if there's something that you're not comfortable having the superintendent research, then the school board can go ahead and do that.
Any further discussion? Okay, Ms. Steves, will you please, I'm sorry, that's not a roll call. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. This brings us to item number 16, consider approval of Resolution 22-12. Sorry, I just got something. I think it's from lack of sleep. Consider approval of Resolution 22-12, establishing combined polling places for multiple precincts and designating hours during which the polling places will remain open for voting for school district elections not held on the day of a statewide election in 2023. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Olson, a second by Ms. Cavalier. Any further discussion, or Superintendent Sesker, would you like to add anything?
Just this is mandatory each year. We have to designate the polls in case there's
Sorry.
in case there does happen to be some sort of a vote or an election.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Steves, will you please do a roll call?
John Bellingham,
Aye.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. Chad Wolf,
Aye.
motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Item number 17, consider approval of Resolution 22-13, directing administration to make recommendations for reductions in programs and positions and reasons therefore, for fiscal year 2022-2023. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Give it to Courtney, I'll second.
Okay.
We have a motion by Ms. Cavalier, a second by Mr. Olson. Any further discussion, or Superintendent Sesker, would you like to touch on this?
No, it's just giving the administration direction that you would like us to go back, if there are going to be reductions this spring, to come back with recommendations that you can take a look at.
Wonderful, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Steves, will you please do a roll call?
John Bellingham,
Aye.
Courtney Cavalier,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Kathy Steve, aye. Chad Wolf.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Wonderful, thank you. The next thing on the item, on the agenda, is number 18. Consider approval of timeline to fill the school board vacancy. So, let's see here. We do have this published. So with that said, I will entertain a motion to approve, as presented, the timeline to fill the open school board position.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Mr. Olson, a second by Ms. Cavalier. Any further discussion on this? I would,
Chair,
yes,
just
yes, Mr.
a
Rocha.
question for clarification. Is this appointment until the incumbent's position is up for reelection or until the next election?
Ms. Treadway's position was scheduled to be on the ballot this November.
Okay.
And from our understanding is this position will be through the end of calendar year 2022.
Okay.
So through December.
Okay.
Just a couple of things to note here. Superintendent Sesker, Mrs. Averill, Mr. Bellingham, and myself have spoken with MSBA, gone back and forth a time or two. And what you see here is really about as fast as we can make this happen. And I think it's important for board members to know that, as well as important for the public to know that if they're interested. You will see that Ms. Treadway's resignation was effective January 1. That means that we are going to have the application and resume due to the district office January 21st, so that gives the community 3 weeks to throw their name in the hat, if you will. We would encourage, I'll take that back. I would encourage, as stated on here, number 3, that we have a subcommittee that will review applications, send out a questionnaire to applicants, review applicant responses, and make a recommendation to the board. We did this, I believe it was Mr. Bellingham and Ms. Cavalier were the subcommittee when Mr. Curry resigned, and I believe he was the last person to resign midterm prior to Ms. Treadway. And I believe Mr. Robeshaw, I think that's where you were appointed to fulfill that that last year before you decide to run. I want to stress that I thought that worked really, really well. And I also want to let people know there's other ways to do it, but it seemed very efficient and it seemed very fair. And I also know that this board has an extremely full January, as this is our second meeting today. And the reason it's so full this January is due to the superintendent search. So we met at 3 o'clock today. Obviously, we're meeting today for our organizational meeting right now. We also have a full day on this this Friday, the 7th, and a full day this Saturday, the 8th. So that is where we will be interviewing 6 candidates for our next superintendent position. In addition to that, we have our board recognition luncheon at the MSBA on the 13th. And then after that, we then have a full Thursday where we will hopefully interview 2 to 3 finalists. And then we will then meet the following day, the 21st, that morning for however long it takes to try to choose and work through determining a finalist. And then after that's all said and done, then we will meet on the 24th with our regular board meeting. So I just want to let people know that this board has a very, very full January, and I would strongly encourage that we once again use a subcommittee, assuming that people are willing to do that and work that way. Then assuming a subcommittee, assuming we did that, number 4 states on here, February 22nd, 2022, the subcommittee will make their recommendation and ask for board approval of a resolution filling the school board vacancy by appointment. Then You fast forward to March 24th, which is a 30-day waiting period to file a petition to reject the appointee expires. That is by statute. That is not something we choose. So there's a 30-day window there. And then on March 28th is when we have our regular school board meeting. We would then look to swear in and have that individual take their oath of office. So I want to make sure that everybody understands those steps, and feel free to ask any questions that you may have, as this is certainly new for some people. Thoughts, comments, questions? We have a motion, we have a second. We're in the discussion phase. Let me ask Mr. Bellingham and Ms. Cavalier, since you did this the last time, would you both be willing to do this again? I'm pretty sure you could use the same questions or very closely or whatever. You'd be willing to do that, both of you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have, yes, Mr.
I would
Olson?
like to volunteer for that committee.
You'd like to volunteer? Okay. So we could have 3 people on that. I would just make sure, Mr. Olson, and that's perfectly fine. I believe there'll be a whole lot of emailing and whatnot, and some of that depends on if we have 1 candidate or 11 candidates, right?
Yeah.
Just depends on how many people do apply. Fair enough? Okay, so the 3 of you, I'll leave it to the 3 of you to figure out who's going to kind of chair that, if you will, and coordinate. Is there any other discussion around filling this school board vacancy position?
I just hope people apply.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, and we'll use this as an opportunity to encourage people to apply if they're watching, or if it makes it in the newspaper or whatever, Mr. Olson.
Yeah, then they should be understanding that they can also file if they want the permanent for 4 years. So they can, not just fill to December 31st of this year, but they can file whenever the filing, May to June, for 2 weeks.
Yep.
So it's not just serve 9 months, and they can. But
Correct. Yes, Mr.
Mr.
Wiltshire.
Chair, just a comment. I find number 5 interesting, that there's a 30-day waiting period to file a petition to reject the appointee. Does that mean anybody and everybody could file a petition to reject the appointee?
Superintendent Sesker?
Yeah, it has to be a percentage of the actual voting public in the district. I think it's 5%.
That's correct.
And so if 5%, if there are signatures of voters within our district, 5% of, the number is 5% of those people, then they have a right to reject the nominee.
Not those who just voted in the last election, but all registered voters?
All registered voters. Yep. Yep. It's a pretty big number to get to.
sounds like a recall type of
It is. It's very similar to that.
situation.
Yep. It's
Where you
just
put
out
your-
in case people, in case the public find that they don't want the candidate that's been selected. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay, some rules are silly.
Yeah.
there's truth to that. You learn something new every day. Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Olson, a second by Ms. Cavalier. Any further discussion on this? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. And once again, thank you to the 3 of you for volunteering to work on that. Your hands will become a little more full. This brings us to item 19, the reports. 19A, Falcon Online Academy FOA update with Ms. Corcoran and Ms. Motley. Come on up, please.
Hello.
Hi.
All right, so we have a few updates. Right now, we are currently working through the process of our online learning application with MDE. And of the 4 steps, we have been approved for the first step, and so now we're just waiting to hear back on steps 2 through 4. We will begin participating in a program development cohort meeting this month, and it lasts through April. The team that will be joining me is Tracy, and then Katie Rotbold and Casey Rutherford. And that's just with other schools that are also applying to be approved online schools in Minnesota. Our current student enrollment, we are currently at 30 elementary students, 28 middle school students, and 80 high school students. Right now, we have opened enrollment for second semester, so we are hearing back from quite a few families. We do have a couple students that are choosing to move back to in-person learning at this time, but we also have new students choosing to join FOA. I'm continuing to receive many inquiries each day from current students in our district, students that are new to our district, students that are enrolled in other schools within our district, and also some homeschool families. So the questions are still coming in. Our full-time OP1 started today, so that was very exciting. It's good timing because right now we're working a lot with transcripts with the semester coming to an end, credit tracking, and then registration for this next semester. And we're also starting to look ahead to next fall. With kindergarten registration going out, we've started to get inquiries from families as well. Our staff remains the same. We have our 2 full-time elementary teachers, our 1.5 mentor teachers for grades 6 through 12, 0.5 K-12 PE teacher, and then we are still accessing specialists from Roosevelt in the areas of music, art, and media. Another thing we've started talking a lot about is our transition for next year, because we are looking at, for the 6-12 age group, transitioning from Edgenuity teachers to Faribault teachers, but still continuing to use Edgenuity curriculum for 1 more year.
So I just want to, first of all, thank Chris and the teachers. They have done a tremendous job, really kind of taking the best of what happened last year, making sure that those best practices continued this year, but also really being innovative around what can this look like for our Faribault students to have this opportunity. And so she's been a great asset to our team, and really a champion to make sure that students have access to high quality learning throughout this online program. Another piece that we are starting here now in January is growing our partnership with Live More, Screen Less. And so they are actually going to be an outside partner who's going to help us in our transition from what we hope year 3 will be is Faribault teachers, Faribault content. But what we really want to do is be able to build that in a way that it's about digital well-being for kids. And so it's not just replicating everything that's done in person into an online learning platform, and now kids are just autonomous in their learning. We know that's not appropriate for students, and they have some really great ideas and resources, and they really are the experts in the field, as they are one of the few, if not the only, actually in the entire country working on this digital well-being initiative. So we're looking forward to partnering FOA and Live More to be able to really think about how do we get to that 3rd-year goal of having FOA as a Faribault content and Faribault teachers. So, and as Chris talked about, next year it's exciting as we transition to Faribault teachers. And so working with Jamie, Benti, and Joe Sage to talk about what can that look like for Faribault teachers, and then also working with FEA to develop a MOU around what that can look like as it pertains to contract language and anything we might need to add. So with that, we'll ask for questions or comments.
Board members?
It's nice to see you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the update.
So thank you. I do have a few questions for you. Can you tell us, of the, I think it's 138 or so students, how many of those kids are new to our district totally? So, I mean, I guess where I'm getting at is from a revenue standpoint of what do those new students mean to us? Do you know that off the top
I
of
have
your
that
head?
right in front of me,
No.
but I can get you that
Okay.
information.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at, is
Yeah.
just
Yep.
what type
Yep.
of revenue. The
I
second
know we
thing,
have had kids open enroll from surrounding districts, and we've also had homeschool students choose to access our program as well.
okay.
But I can get you.
So if a student open enrolls here from a different district, they're bringing in, give or take, $7,000, $7,500,
Yes.
give or take somewhere? Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
and it depends on if they're enrolled full-time or part-time.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned the approval of the first step, you're waiting on 2 through 4. Are all 4 of those steps an annual process you have to do every year or no?
No, Not that I know of.
Yeah, no, we just need to do it for the initial certification process. So if you remember, we were working on the process last year, then MDE revised their approval process. And so now we are working through that and again, have that cohort model now starting the second half of the year.
Gotcha.
And so this is all to be fully certified for the next school year.
Okay,
So we're
thank
right on track with submissions and.
So once you
MDE's
do it for
timeline.
next year and you do it
We're good.
according to their, kind of their book of oil, if you will, you're good.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Tell us about the benefits or why you're looking at moving from Edgenuity to FPS staff. Tell us about that.
So there's a couple immediate benefits. Number one, financial. Having Edgenuity teachers, that's revenue that's going to staff outside of our district, and we'd much rather have, as, again, a cost savings, as well as having our own Faribault teachers. They know our students, they know our community, they know our families. It's just way more accessible for a family. If needed, we could do a home visit. That's not possible with the Edgenuity teachers. That's the purpose of our mentor teachers right now, to kind of bridge that gap, knowing that Edgenuity is just accessible. Those teachers are only accessible online. So it creates more of a, more flexibility for us in what we want to do with programming, in addition to keeping it student-centered and not having just some individual who tends to be more a name than actually someone building relationships, making sure that students have what they need to be successful academically, as well as taking care of their social emotional well-being too.
Okay, thank you. I have two other questions.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to dominate this conversation. Any real aha moments in this year of like, wow, this is really great, or wow, this is really horrible? Any real aha moments?
Well, I know in talking to our mentor teachers, they've really enjoyed getting to know kids on a more personal one-on-one level. So I think that's been great. Just noticing what their strengths and weaknesses are and helping them advocate for what they need, whether it's with an Edgenuity teacher, whether it's connecting them with their school counselor here, or hooking them up with social work services. But they've really enjoyed that more one-on-one relationship because they get more time to do that with our students. I know Ryan Lucan also applied for a grant and received money to purchase PE equipment, and so that's been great. The kids, I know he delivered it to them, so he got to meet them, kind of have a little home visit, and I know that that was really exciting for the students and the families. And
That was a FEEP grant, by the
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yep.
And then my last question is just, first semester is coming to a close here in a couple weeks, right? And FOA runs parallel to high school or middle school, right?
Yep.
Okay, so do you think just on a whole, if you will, 138 students in there, do you think parents are happy with the FOA options? You know what I mean? Certainly some kids are gonna really excel and some kids are gonna be like, oh my gosh, I just got hit over the head with a 2x4. I didn't do anything and we've got 2 weeks left. Because there is a fair amount of freedom there instead of sitting in class every day, right? So what are your kind of thoughts, just overall parent feedback and stuff like that?
I think parents have appreciated this option for their child because not every kid learns best in like our brick and mortar schools. Our teachers communicate very well with parents. Our mentor teachers at the upper level send weekly progress reports home. They send videos to kind of help the parent navigate how to use Edgenuity 2 to check on their student each week. And I think they've greatly appreciated that. I know they appreciate the flexibility that it allows for the student, whether they're full-time or part-time, because some of our students have schedule conflicts at the high school, so in order for them to access classes, some have come our direction for some as well.
And the other piece I'll add too is just that willingness to have a designee at home too. And so Chris has done a really great job of making sure that if someone is opting into Falcons Online, we make sure that they have the supports they need, both at home and in person, or not in person, but through the schools, because we don't have that in-person connection, where often when a student comes to school, if there's something that they need, we have the ability to go, okay, we're taking you and connecting you to whatever it is. We don't have that when they don't come in person. And so I think really having some intentional conversations before they sign up for FOA has really been a positive partnership for parents to have a positive experience as well as for the kids to really succeed in this model. We know it's not for everyone, but we also know brick and mortar is not for everyone. So it has really created a great opportunity to meet student and family needs in a unique way.
Well, thank you for the feedback and thank you for the programming. Obviously, it's not the way that we've always done things, right? I mean,
Right.
in the past, I know Superintendent Sesker and I, we've talked for years, and I call it the Amazon effect of education. It's anywhere, anytime, you know, and if you're not offering it, some of those students are going to be gone. They're going to go elsewhere, right? So it's not for everybody, but I do think we certainly have a group of people that it does work well for it. So I applaud all of you. Mr. Olson?
It takes parents' permission, right? Yeah, so,
Yeah, I always connect with parents
okay,
before we.
so students just can't say, I'm going to do this.
No, correct.
Okay, I thought so.
Yep.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, you guys.
This brings us to item 20, our adjournment. I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion, by Mr. Olson, a second by Ms. Cavalier. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. We are adjourned. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.